today we're going to talk about housing, real estate, and climate, and how we can use them synergetically or in opposition. I think Nini will introduce the speakers because Lauren is having connection issues, but she'll join us in a few minutes. But before we start, let me remind everyone of the intention of this speaker series and the ground rule for the conversation today. The purpose of our global seminars is to have open and honest learning conversation between practitioners in cities and government and partners supporting these entities. The calls are not on the record. We ask that you not attribute any comments made today or question asked to the speakers unless you have the person's express permission to do so, and we can help you obtain a permission if you want to quote them in the press or any other media. We're thrilled to have, as always, a very positive response. I think we have close to 300 people registered today. So to facilitate this discussion, and as a matter of practicality, we ask that you ask the question in the Q&A function of the WebEx. Please note that the recording of this session, as well as the PowerPoint and any other document, will be posted online by Monday. So I think Lauren is still not here, so I'll pass on the screen to Nini, who will introduce the speakers.
Here,
over to
Francis.
You. Oh, Lauren, you're there. Fantastic.
With all my connection issues, I'm so glad to be here in a different setting, as you can see, as usual. But I would not want to miss the speakers tonight coming to us from Reall and from the Jakarta Property Institute to discuss this issue of our real estate and low carbon cities. I think it's been very interesting in the past few months to talk with a lot of journalists, investors, real estate, property developers who have been nervous, right? Are our cities going to disappear? Are we going to lose interest? And in fact, the opposite has happened. We've seen housing prices skyrocket in different locations. At the same time, lots of developers claiming that they're moving towards net zero. But at the same time, we still have so much of the population who has inadequate housing. And homelessness remains a challenge. Affordability remains a challenge. So how do we deal with these cross purposes, the climate urgency and the equity urgency that we see? And how can the real estate sector actually help? Are these targets real? What do they actually mean? I mean, I've spent the better part of 2 decades working in the climate space. Francis, you've worked in the disaster resilience and investment space. I don't know about you, Francis, but if I was able to get into a conversation about a property that I might be buying and know for sure that it was going to be safe or resilient, or that it was going to be low carbon, I would be much more inclined to want to stay there. So anyway, we hope we'll get into more of those topics as the hour goes on. And to help us to understand, we have 2 really incredibly diverse and experienced speakers on the line. So we've got Tom Woodward, who's the climate lead from Reall. For those of you who are less familiar with Reall, they are doing some very interesting work to increase affordable housing in Africa and emerging Asia. They're looking at it in a very holistic way in terms of affordability, safety, access to opportunity, and I'm sure that Tom is going to tell us about that in detail. And we also have a very good and dear friend and one of our original instigators, I should say, of resilience in Jakarta, Wendy Haryanto, who's the executive director of the Jakarta Property Institute. And so she'll be talking to us about the issues in Jakarta and her experience, really bringing not just one, but many in the sector along on this journey towards resilience and low carbon growth. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Tom to start us off in the discussion tonight.
Thanks very much, Lauren. Thanks for that introduction, and to Francis as well. And thank you for inviting Reall to take part in this panel discussion. Let me get my screen shared and full screen. Yeah, so as Lauren said, my name's Tom. I'm climate lead and architect at Reall, which is an innovator and investor in affordable housing. It's great to have been given the opportunity to contribute to this panel. We've worked closely with both the World Bank and the Resilient Cities Network for a long time, and it's brilliant that we're bringing together resilient cities and affordable housing through the subject of decarbonising the built environment. Let me first start by just introducing Reall. So Reall exists to improve the life chances of 100 million people in urban Africa and Asia by 2030, and we're doing so by building a climate smart affordable homes movement. We do so, as I said, as an innovator and investor in affordable housing. We intend to prove that this is an environmentally and commercially viable opportunity. And the key message that we're bringing to you today is that climate mitigation and resilience and poverty reduction are connected, interlinked opportunities and challenges. And we need to move away from cost to investment as a narrative. In terms of this investment, we have estimated that there is a $17 trillion market, which is very uncrowded and a huge opportunity to address climate mitigation and resilience at scale. To contextualize that, 39% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the built environment in terms of the operation of buildings and the construction of buildings. We know that 70% of buildings that will exist in Africa and Asia by 2050 are yet to be built. And we also know that 77% of population growth by 2050 will occur in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, which are also two of the most vulnerable regions to the effects of climate change. And with 1.2 billion people in informal housing that's estimated to rise to 3 billion people by 2050, we cannot afford to address this problem and this gap through concrete and tin, but we also don't have to. So Reall's approach is split into two components. Firstly, through build, we build proof of concept housing with our local partners across the world to demonstrate that environmentally, commercially viable housing can be delivered for the bottom 40% of the income pyramid locally. And we take everything we've learned from that proof of concept, the evidence that it's viable and the learning that we've achieved. And we work with state actors, with cities, with investors to deliver market transforming effects that can take those solutions to scale and unlock the market for a wider segment of the population. We work across 14 countries and we have 5 countries that we prioritize, which are Uganda, Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, and India. And in our 31-year history, we've helped over 3.5 million people through housing, which includes empowering almost 750,000 people to improve, develop, or own their own home, almost 1.3 million people gaining security from threat of eviction, almost 500,000 people benefiting from improved water provision, and 1.1 million people benefiting from improved sanitation. So in terms of our approach to delivering climate smart, we know that a green affordable home is both an opportunity to reduce emissions in terms of climate mitigation and a resilient solution in and of itself. In terms of mitigation, one of the key tools we use is EDGE, which for anyone unfamiliar is a fantastic green building certification system and app that's designed to lower energy use, water use, and embodied energy and materials. We think it's fantastic because it's low cost, it's easy to access and easy to understand as a web-based platform. It shifts the narrative from cost to investment and cost saving, and it creates a common vocabulary and standard, which is of course a key challenge in decarbonising an industry that is inherently complex and much easier to get wrong than get right, and much easier to greenwash than to deliver truly in a green fashion. And it's helped us build momentum. So over the last year, we've approved over well over 1,000 units that are committed to EDGE certification, and we've also supported our entire partner network in becoming trained in using the EDGE app. In terms of resilience, we fundamentally believe that housing and an affordable green home is the single strongest resilience tool that you can provide a person or a family with. And so at the core of our objective there is to deliver as many affordable houses as possible, either directly or through partners. We know that because not only does a house provide shelter from the increasing inclement weather that we're seeing as a result of climate change, but it also increases access to energy, access to water, sanitation, financial stability, transport, community, and the list goes on. And so to give you a couple of examples, one is in Kenya. We're working with an organization called BuildX Studio, who are a housing developer that are delivering housing in the center of Nairobi that's affordable to the bottom 40%, with access to community facilities, with access to transport, and simultaneously achieving edge advance, which means savings of at least 40% against base case in energy reduction, water reduction, and embodied energy and material reduction. Likewise, we're working with a partner in Pakistan, Modulus Tech, whose business model to delivering affordable housing has quite honestly started with the climate crisis. And so their off-grid autonomous factory-produced homes achieve a 98% saving in embodied carbon against conventional building construction. And they do so through a panelized system supported by a lightweight steel frame structure that's built in factories, and they integrate off-grid energy and water solutions, meaning full autonomy for the housing and therefore being able to be deployed anywhere irrespective of infrastructure grids, and aligning with a kind of zero carbon edge standard, which is the highest edge standard that you can achieve. And the exciting thing at city scale is that there are many incentives that can drive further uptake of these sorts of solutions across the world. And there are a growing number that we can list as examples. For example, in India and Pune, there's an additional floor area ratio incentive relative to the percentage improvements environmentally, where housing developers can effectively build larger developments if they can demonstrate that they're green. Likewise, in Kenya, there's a tax exemption on interest income for bonds and securities for green buildings, and there's also an incentive for free land for social housing developers that build to the EDGE standard. And then in Ghana, there's, for anyone that builds a green building, they can obtain discounted building permit fees. And the reality is that the more of these sorts of forward-looking incentives that we start to see, the easier it is for all of the actors in this space to fully invest in decarbonized, low-cost solutions. And one of the critical things that we view in making further progress in this area is bringing together an increasingly connected global network of actors, including yourselves, and that's why forums such as this one is such a fantastic way of doing so, and likewise, so is the World Bank and the IFC's EDGE and Building Resilience Index tools. One of our platforms aiming to achieve a similar thing is our open source data dashboard, which documents every project we've ever done, everything we've ever learned through doing so, and is very much intended to help move the whole industry and the whole global community forward. So we would really encourage anyone that would like to know more about what we do to check out our data dashboard and wider website and get in touch, because ultimately, in addressing the climate crisis, we need to do so in a way that is inclusive and gives everyone access to a low carbon home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. I can already see there are some questions about how this is rolling out in different countries that we're going to come back to in the Q&A section. Some specifics about Pakistan and India coming up, which I know you'll be well placed to help us dive into. I want to turn the screen and the microphone over to my dear friend Wendy in Jakarta. Wendy, it's great to have you with us tonight.
Nice to see you again, Lauren. It's been a while.
It's been a long while.
Yeah.
Even though it's such a short distance between.
I know. Well, very soon we'll meet again.
Very soon. Okay, well, I'm going to let you have the microphone now to tell us about the experience with the Jakarta Property Institute. So over to you.
All right, let me try to share screen now. Right. You seeing what I'm seeing, yeah? Okay. Let's go. Let me. Okay. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Francis, for the opportunity to speak tonight. It's been a pleasure to be one of the speakers in this event. I've actually been following a lot of your events, but I've not been able to communicate much lately. Um, the topic I found very interesting, hence when Nini approached me to talk in this forum, I thought it's about time we address this issue. I mean, Jakarta being the second largest metropolitan in the world. To give you a general picture of Jakarta's density, the metropolitan housed about 27 million people during the day, and at night, Jakarta itself, as in the city of Jakarta, outside of the metropolitan, has only about 13 million. So that shows the difference of people between the 27 million to the 13 million. That's how many people are commuting every day for work. So we talk about carbon emission. That's probably one of the culprits. Okay. One of the topics that we're always endorsing in Jakarta Property Institute, why it's called Jakarta Property Institute is because our members are all private developers. We're always talking to the government, advocating better policies on why Jakarta needs to build up. There is no other way to build up Jakarta, improving the economy other than building up. Now, of course, we're being attacked left, right, and center when we say this, because everybody is saying, how could you build up when Jakarta is sinking? How could you build up when the building regulations are not firm yet? There's so many this, that, and but, and all that, what that thing. But again, having said that, I mentioned earlier about Jakarta's density. Jakarta is density on horizontal level. So you see the picture on the very top, it's super dense on a horizontal level. If you look at the vertical density from basically if you fly a drone across Jakarta, you will see that only small section of Jakarta is dense vertically. So there is a lot of potential for Jakarta to even be more dense on a vertical level. Horizontally, these houses are taking so much groundwater. There is no regulation into taking groundwater. The government supplied water is only covering about 40% of Jakarta. So all these houses that you see over there does not cover does not receive the water supply from the government. So hence, there's another problem on the water sanitation issue. Now, having said that as well, public parks is a big, how should I say? The government is actually aiming at 30% green spaces in Indonesia. Well, let's put in Jakarta as well, 30%. At the moment, we're at 4%. One of the reasons is because we don't have any more space for the public parks. All the public park spaces are being built. There is a kampong, there is a riverside, there is a something else. So if you don't build vertically, you're taking away spaces for the open spaces for public and also for the affordable housings. You look at the map of Jakarta right now, affordable housings are way out in Jakarta. Sometimes it takes 4 hours to get to the center of economic, which is the city of Jakarta itself, to where the affordable housings are. Hence, we're always advocating for vertical housing. Now, believe it or not, we do have, with all the lack of regulation, the first building that gets LEEDs platinum, green building LEEDs platinum, is the Sequis Tower. Basically, it's in the central, Sudirman Central Business District. If you ask me why the owner wants to do it, when it actually costs him 30% extra for construction, it's because for him, it's legacy. Because he wants to pass this building down to his next generations. The building is only for lease. He doesn't strata the building. It took quite a long time to build this because he kept on changing the internal of it. It's not that big of a building. It's only about 38 to 40 floors, something like that. So it's not a tallest building in Jakarta. It's not, but it's very well built. It's got all the requirements you want to have for a platinum licensed building. But because it takes it will take you 30% extra at cost to build this kind of building, then you can't scale it up. Only people like him would want to build like this for legacy. In terms of regulations, only 2 cities in Indonesia have the building regulations, green building regulations. It's Jakarta and Bandung. Bandung is basically the capital of Western Java, about 2 hours away only in Jakarta. It's the second largest city in Indonesia. There is no set standard. Most of them are basically government regulated because they believe they should have it as part of a formal regulation in place. Implementation is not monitored. The technology is never, there is never any R&D that requires or even help implement the technology as well. And to make it worse, this regulation is never linked to any commercial value. Now, I'll talk about this later on why this has not been a big turn on for the developers. Now, on the right is basically a picture of vertical greens. This we have been trying to endorse for God knows, probably 5 years. We talked to them about allowing green verticalization in buildings and be calculated as part of the green requirement of the building. Land prices in Jakarta is very high. For the developers to keep on creating horizontal green, whereby it's actually inaccessible for public, because I mean, as you know, because of a lot of demos and riots in Jakarta, all the buildings have fences. So if you're not working or living or visiting somebody in that particular building, there is a fence that doesn't allow public to just access in and out. So creating green spaces per space of development does not create a good green public spaces for the city, because those spaces cannot be accessed. What we've been trying to endorse is, if you can take away all these small green spaces per individual building, you take it out, you do a compounded or a collection of all these green spaces, you can probably create a central park somewhere in Jakarta. So that will be a proper park whereby everybody can access. It'll be enjoyable, but for the people's activities. So we've been talking about that, and cross my finger. By the end of this year, we might see something coming out of it. Yeah. Here's another thing that becomes a hindrance in creating regulations as well. Reverse osmosis, gray brown water recycling and turn it to drinkable water, has been done to most of the buildings in the central business district. Reason is not because it's required, but because it improves their bottom line on their books. They invest a lot on the equipments, but as it operates, it actually reduces their operational cost, and they know they can recycle the water and use it for something else. So at the end of the day, their bottom line improves. Now, one of the reasons why this has not been advertised well or announced well, even in the Jakarta media, there are 2 things. There is a minimum requirement to, how should I say, to return the gray or brown water back to the city, deposited it back to the city, and we're going to have, the private developers are going to have to pay the city for them to take it from us. Okay, and then they do the recycling or they do whatever with it. However, that minimum can never be reduced again. There is a set standard. If you actually deposited less, then they'll audit you, or you still need to pay the minimum that they require for you to pay, which is, you know, it's against all the concept of green building. Number 2, and I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this, but wudu is actually water for prayers for the Muslims. Indonesian's community is 90% Muslim. So there is a lot of water being used for prior to prayer. So you wash up and all that. So that wudu water. All the sanitations area in buildings, they always have a section for wudu, for you to wash your face, hand, and feet before prayer. Now, The regulation says that the water for wudu has to be flowing water, okay, or it comes from a natural source. These buildings are having problem announcing the reverse osmosis. Some people actually know, but they will not declare it. Okay, so this is a cultural and religion issue in Indonesia as well. Hence, the regulation for this has not come out until now. Few years back in 2016, we actually had Climate Works Australia allowing us to, not just allowing us, actually funding for us to have neighbors, the grading system that they have over there for their green buildings, come to Jakarta and did 4 pilot projects for 4 different buildings. We learned a lot from them, basically because this rating system is linked to the commercial value of all the buildings in Australia. I mean, and it encourages people to want to have a higher grade, because then the commercial value of the building is actually increased, because it links to the weighted average score that they do. Now, we did it for, I believe it was about a month and a half, 2 months process, because they look at the record of the water and energy that they graded. They benchmark it to Darwin. Now, I mean, we argue about this a lot. Why is it Darwin? But because they need to have a benchmark of a city in order to grade a different city, they had to pick a city in Australia. The closest in terms of weather was apparently Darwin. We still argue that, you know, Australia is a 4-season country. We're on 2 season only. But since Darwin was the closest, okay, we got it. But for us to have this standardized and become a regulation in Indonesia, it will take them to have to do a benchmark to several different cities in Indonesia, so not just Jakarta. They need to have it regulated through the government. They need to also have these ratings been approved by our department, national department, ministries as well. So it's still a long way to go, but this is where we should be heading in terms of commercial values linked to the rating system. This is a bad, unfortunately, it's not a good story to end this presentation, but a number of buildings have discontinued their licenses for green building in Indonesia. I'll talk about Jakarta most of all, because most of the high rises are in Jakarta. Not because they're not doing the practices anymore, but because they find that plaque on the wall saying bronze or gold or something like that, green building license, is no longer of value. They're still doing their savings for energy, for water, for anything else that they could do, but only for reasons of improving their bottom line. So in summary, if the government of Indonesia cannot endorse or create a regulation whereby it becomes an incentives for these people to want to advertise or want to improve their performance, their green performance, then they will just do it because it saves money. Then it will be different people's pockets and wallets, and the standard will not be as equal. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Lauren, I'll let you lead with the first question.
Okay, I'm trying to unshare. Hold on. Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Francis. I think the question that came up right in the beginning is for Tom, but it also can relate, Wendy, to the presentation that you just made. I think one of the challenges is both the speed and then the integration between incentives and what private developers are able to do and able to secure financing for. And so, Tom, the question was really, how can you at the same time integrate these different considerations for energy efficiency, disaster risk reduction in particular in really challenging environments. And in this case, the question was around South Asia in particular.
Thanks, Lauren. And you're absolutely right. It's a really big challenge, and it's a challenge in the context of kind of decarbonizing. It's a different challenge to, for example, the energy industry or the transport industry, because the built environment is such a fragmented sector with so many actors and so many points in the process. So if we think about your comment at the beginning, is if I could buy a low carbon building, I would. That, you know, we know that there is a 300 million home deficit in particular in affordable housing, and actually just being able to access a home and access the finance to purchase that home is enough of a barrier without necessarily worrying about low carbon. You know, you're kind of forced as a consumer to take what you can get, and everybody will be familiar with that process of finding a place to buy or a place to rent and rushing to get that offer in before someone else does because of the demand supply interaction. And really throughout that process, there are kind of critical challenges at each stage that mean it would be naive to say that it's an easy solution or an easy win when we've known the climate crisis is coming for so long. You know, everything from land sale to the intent of the designers, to the intent of the builders, to the intent of the insurers and the banks. Every single person in that list needs to be dedicated to low carbon buildings for it to be seen through in reality. And it only takes one weak link to swap out you know, sustainable timber for heavy concrete to undermine a key component of that process. So really, you know, with that in mind, I think we have to take a pragmatic approach, but we also have to acknowledge that for all of the scariness of the climate crisis, it is also a certainty. And therefore, as we've seen in other industries, the further into the 2020s we go, the more that anybody that decides to take a competitive advantage and invest in this area now, and any city that chooses to invest in this area and stimulate the provision of green buildings now, is going to have a lot more momentum in 5 years' time and a competitive advantage as a result. And we've seen that even in our use of Edge. It's, you know, it's a relatively simple thing, but moving our partner network to a point where they're comfortable in using Edge and certifying buildings, and everybody in our team and in our network and understanding what that means, it is a kind of slow and challenging process, but one that is moving forward and building momentum, so we can move from just Edge certification to what level of Edge certification can you be achieving, whether that's 30% or 70% or 80%. And actually, it's critical to not let perfect be the opposite of good, or enemy of good. And in that respect, you know, we think that everybody involved in the sector that can take action and move things forward should and can, knowing that it will pay back in the years to come. It is an investment. In terms of your second point of your question, Lauren, in terms of particularly challenging areas and disaster resilience, that and climate mitigation are intrinsically linked. If you build a energy efficient building, that means that you don't have to spend a lot of money cooling it or heating it, depending on where it is. You know, obviously cooling it predominantly in India. And in order to do so, you can take some really simple, straightforward design methodologies such as cross ventilation and solar shading, and access to clean water and clean energy solutions. And therefore, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Every quality building can support resilience against any natural disaster that is coming if it isn't built in a flood-prone area, for example. And part of that is just legitimate housing that's done in a formal, regulated way, in the right areas of land that are affordable and in safe locations.
Thanks, Tom. And in a similar vein, Wendy, I mean, Jakarta is seismic. Jakarta is flood, as you've been talking to, and there are challenges with regulation that exist that you've pointed out. Where are you seeing the brightest spots in achieving multiple benefits?
Brightest spot, you mean as in sectors?
In areas, it could be even in specific projects.
The easiest would be for the public parks. If you're looking at physical sector, the the government is aiming at creating better accesses to public places. So now with the creation of the new infrastructure of the MRT and the LRT and also forth, whether or not you like it, within the integration of the commuter lines, you will need to have public places. So it's easier to influence them from there to create more green spaces in the city.
Wendy, if we can stay in Jakarta, you seem to, in your presentation, you really showed how difficult it is to change things without proactive engagement of the government. The problem is so big. Jakarta is such a dense city with so many interacting pieces. But if you had the power to influence the government and kind of ask for one key regulation or one key area where that you think could drive or at least initiate a process towards more efficient building and eventually decarbonization of the city, where do you think that would be? And then I'll come back to you, Tom, with a similar question, because Tom, you work in a very different environment. When Jakarta is built, it continues to grow, but it doesn't have more space. You work mostly in Africa, you work in India, where people continue to build. In fact, you use this statistic saying 77% of housing is yet to be built by 2050. David Lallement, who many of you know, once told me that we are going to build by 2050 building more infrastructure than the humankind has ever built, right? And so that gives us a huge opportunity to try to do it better this time. But if you could do it better, what would be the main elements? And one sub-question to that, Tom, we'll go to Wendy, but Tom, you mentioned edge, you mentioned that 39% of carbon emission comes from housing, taking out energy sources. Yeah, you can decarbonize energy sources, but how much can you actually reduce simply by changing the construction type and construction standard? But let's go back to you, Wendy. It's a difficult question, but it's an important one. If we want to reach scale, where do we start?
Yeah, understood. Well, I tell you that it's never boring living in Jakarta. So I can't stay too long in Singapore because I find Singapore to be boring because I live here. So there's always something new in Jakarta. But okay, let me try to answer your question from this. Okay, the number one income for the city government in Jakarta and also for Indonesia is from car registration. Okay, so it's that car taxes that you pay annually. That's actually the number one income, the highest on top. Okay, hence trying to change the regulation on limiting the car numbers per building, as in car park spaces and also forth, is the hardest thing to do. Because we need to reduce the number of cars here and there. You have ERP being installed, you have this and that, you have the emission tests, you have I think what's coming up is the limitation on the years of cars, the number of years of cars. So you can't have older cars for more than 10 years or something like that. Yeah, they're trying to do that as well. However, all this impacts on the income of the government. If I were to change anything, Tom, at this point in time, we are trying to create a very non-motorized transit-oriented area for the MRT, LRT, and the other commuter lines. Okay, this area we wanted it to be free of carbon emissions, meaning no cars, no motorcycles, no nothing over there. Everything is open, public, walking, for them to go from one transport to the other. But until this now, I cannot get it passed. Even when you talk to the minister, all the way, several ministers, to the governor, to all the related people, I still can't get it passed. So if I could do something about it, if I think what would change a lot is by doing that regulation. Just on the TOD areas, which is going to be quite a lot, make it free of carbon emission. So meaning the what we call TOD is within 750 square meter of where the station is. So that's a lot of buildings. If free of that, meaning free of cars, everybody have to take the public transport, it will be good for the city. I think we can finally see blue sky again.
That would mean finding another source of revenue for the
yeah,
government.
they need to find something else. Oh, well, they will try to get it from the land tax, but or something like that. But yeah, it's probably a barter on certain things, but they still need the income. But we have to understand why they won't do it. It's because that's the top income, and the difference between number 1 and 2 is very high. So you sacrifice number 1, number 2 may not be able to pick up right away, or 3 or 4, something like that. So the number 1 is still the highest.
The increase of property tax, which I imagine is connected to the value of building, wouldn't be sufficient to compensate, or at least.
No, they tried to increase the property tax last year, and of course there is a lot of anger and chaos because of it. Property owners started demanding the reasons and causes behind the increase. I mean, property tax should be increased because of the transaction that backs it up, because of the demand. Last year, there was hardly any demand. We have some land transactions, but mostly because of COVID, because of the property was actually slowing down in the past 2 years. There was hardly any transaction. Hence, still it went up.
So property tax is only on the transaction. It's not an annual tax on the value of the building.
Tax and land. So PBB is pajak, bumi, dan bangunan. So it basically is the land and the building. But the building itself is only it's not that much. It's the land tax that is very high. See, they keep on saying, oh, the capital value of the land increases. Yeah, but it should be based on demand. There should be a lot of transaction that improves demand, hence the prices increases. Certain areas was increased by 44%. And this was during COVID last year. So we're still arguing with them about that. I still haven't got a clear answer from them.
Let's go to Tom, and maybe, Tom, you will have some answer. By building using EDGE standard, by how much can you reduce your energy consumption, for example? Have you done, I mean, I'm sure you have done some calculation. Does it make the investment worthwhile for the developers? You obviously have shown this for low income. If you've done similar work for, I'm sure the IFC has done similar work for larger building and bigger developers, but why don't you share your experience on that?
Absolutely, Francis. And I think it's a really pertinent question, in particular for the affordable segment of the market, because you know, the lower your monthly income, the higher the proportion of energy as your monthly outgoings, because at the end of the day, that costs the same no matter who you are when you're connecting to the grid. So there's one question there, which is, you know, solar PV is still a massively underutilized resource, in particular in terms of integration into housing. Our experience across all of the markets that we work in is that energy is unreliable, and it almost becomes more of a selling point just saying that you can have a reliable continual source of energy than it is as to whether it saves you a few pence. But you can link that quite effectively, and it's something that IFC are doing really well, to green finance in particular in terms of mortgages. And it's an area that we're working in very heavily as well, is that we know one of the barriers to accessing affordable housing is that initial access to end user finance. We can point to lots of examples of 20% interest rates over 15-year terms, which just takes the concept of being on a low income and being able to afford a property over, you know, within 30% of your monthly income out of the question entirely. So it's really interesting when you start to play the kind of energy efficiency question into that. The EDGE tool is fantastic because you're absolutely right. You can make substantial savings, and why it makes sense for developers is that you can quantify those savings as you design the project. So it doesn't become something mystical, but it becomes something quantifiable. And one of the challenges there is actually tying up the incentive for the developer to build green and build energy efficient with the user, who is ultimately the beneficiary of that energy efficiency. And that's where the really interesting kind of combination of end user finance can really come in, because in doing so, you can highlight that it's going to make it easier for you as the developer to sell your property, sell it faster. For the user, you've got the easy sell of actually having an energy efficient building with reliable energy, but also with reduced costs and access to more finance. And then for the financer, I think that there's a 32% better repayment rate for people that live in energy efficient buildings. So there's a compelling argument all round, and it's kind of a key part of it is actually just joining those pieces up.
Now, if we were to go all out and we managed to convince developer to build using EDGE standard, what's the average reduction in energy consumption per building? What's your sense, or what can be achieved using those standards without much of a cost increase in the construction?
Sure. So it's framed, you know, there are really simple measures that everybody can take, like installing low energy appliances and low energy light bulbs, and even stuff like that can reduce your energy consumption by 20% and 30%. And that even just those standards, when you multiply that by the scale of the number of houses delivered on a daily basis, is huge. But you can also make a case for taking some further steps and reducing, particularly in reducing cooling requirements, to really bring that number down across the world in a way that, you know, looks more like 70 or 80%. And it is possible to do. It is possible to substantially reduce your cooling requirements by looking at items like cross ventilation, simply just having windows in 2 walls rather than 1 wall, or having an appropriately high ceiling and installing a fan which is low energy, and can dramatically reduce the costs associated. And that's a great part of the EDGE tool, is that you can start to look at those numbers. And to come to your other question, it's for me, it's one of the easiest wins that cities can achieve, is to encourage a movement to these simple standards that actually anyone can subscribe to and anyone can get on board with quite quickly as either a housing developer or a consumer, without needing too much enforcement, because it can be done quite simply.
So that's how we link to regulation and possible government interventions. I think that's actually quite smart. I wanted to come back to Wendy. Wendy, you talked a lot about greening of buildings. And in Singapore, there are some smart regulation that gives developer better height to surface ratio if they green part of the vertical greening, as they call it. Is that something that's being considered in Jakarta? It's something that you think would make sense?
We have introduced that. There is a conversion. So, for example, let's say a development needs to have 30% of the land to be green, as in really unused, so only for plantations and grass and things like that. If they have less than that, certain percentage of that, what we propose as a conversion is 1 to 4 ratio, if I'm not mistaken. So they will need to, the difference that they cannot make up on the horizontal level, they need to make up 4 times on the vertical level, something like that. But again, doing something vertical is not cheap. That's one for one, because it's actually more complex than having it horizontal. There is no initiative for that, and then the incentive is also not there. So most of them are ended up having different types of advocating negotiation on reducing the green spaces in the horizontal level, if you know it, on a different scale, or they create a public park somewhere, but not within the building. So they compensate on other things. Yeah, they trade up. They create a small public park somewhere, or a play area or something like that. So, but again, going vertical, it's something that we have talked to them as well. But there needs to be an incentive for them to want to do so. It's quite complex. I mean, I look at the system of it. I mean, it looks very nice, but I know it's actually not that easy as in having the plants, the crawlers come up. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually took A few of them, a few of our civil servants who are handling the permit issues, the building codes, to meet up with the BCA people in Singapore, URA, BCA, CLC. They've been so helpful in terms of trying to educate, help us get a better public policies in Jakarta.
I know, Lauren, you talk to a lot of developers who would like to export their expertise, but don't really know how to do it. So maybe you can do some matchmaking there.
I think it's a really interesting question. And actually, when I was going to ask both Tom and Wendy, because you come at this from different angles, right? Property developers that are more private and working, Tom with property development in the affordable housing space more so. And I think one of the things that's so dramatic in the real estate sector is actually how much of the investment cycle is actually captured, right? If we look at, you know, the amount of GDP invested is north of 10% in the real estate sector, right, globally, year on year. So the amount of capital the real estate sector has is incredible when you think about the scale of change and what needs to happen. It seems like this is incredible. But then when we talk to developers, a problem we see is that they're looking at things on a project by project basis, right? They're trying to develop that one project and maximize value. And so I think my question to both of you is, when you're trying to work at a scale of, say, building a low carbon or resilient district as a city, what are the kinds of things that are necessary in order to create place-based approaches for this kind of low carbon development that might, you know, break down boundaries between individual kinds of investors and other kinds of actors in the space? Tom, maybe we can come to you first.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's a great question, Lauren, and you're absolutely right. It's a core component of how project development is approached, not just in individual projects by developers, but then also in individual components of those projects at different stages in the delivery cycle. Along with what we've already talked about in terms of common standards that are recognizable to investors. So, you know, even just being able to say the full portfolio of this investor is EDGE certified is an indication of moving in the right direction and keeping that conversation simple and not going down rabbit holes. So when you then take that to districts, I think it remains my kind of easy win is actually just having those common vocabularies and common standards. But when you get into kind of the harder wins, that's when you can start to look at more circular economy principles. And it was a kind of question that Francis asked earlier in terms of where are the easy wins in decarbonizing buildings and where are the hard wins. You know, we know concrete's not going anywhere. We know that most of the world is looking to purchase a house that looks sturdy and as the biggest investment most people ever make, they will want to be doing so in a way that they can trust. And the same as investors, they will be wanting to invest in something that they know works and is proven. So there's a focus there on actually looking at how we can decarbonize those sectors. You know, concrete, how is the concrete fired? Can it be done from renewable sources? Can the chemical parts of the process be substituted? But there's also the opportunity to incubate innovation. So housing developers that are looking at things like modular methods of construction and delivering in neighborhoods in ways that are significantly lower carbon and, for example, use sustainably sourced timber that sequesters carbon as it's grown and can be repeated in a circular economy type way. Those are the kind of solutions that some of our partners are looking at, and that's where kind of beyond district but regional and national level policy can really help those things grow to scale over the next 5 to 10 years. If you look at Kenya, there's been a logging ban in place after deforestation since 1999. But actually, if you start to rebuild a sustainable timber industry in a way that's regulated and link that to the supply and demand for housing that's built in those ways, it's a really challenging process. But actually, if you get it right, you could have a very different conversation in 5 years.
Okay, I'm gonna try to answer the question via an example because there's actually a good example within the city of Jakarta itself. So Lauren, Nini, if you ever come to Jakarta, I'll take you to this area. There is an area that is called the Carret Triangle of Carret. Okay, it's within the CBD of Jakarta. It's actually triangle because it's bordered by the main roads. On the edge of it are 17 plots of occupied, completed office, hotels, apartments, you name it. Okay. In the middle of it is a kampong. Now, what we've been trying to do for the past 4 years, because one side of the triangle is having an MRT line. So you have 3 different stations on that one side. What people do nowadays is for them to go from one end to the other. By the way, it's about 5 hectares. Yeah, about 5 hectares in the middle. So outside is about 11 hectares, I think. For people to go from one end to the other, they could have just crossed the kampong. But what they do, they take a car and they go around. Okay. What we've been trying to do in the past 4 years, because there is an MRT line, we try to create a green area in the middle by having affordable housing. Basically, decarbonize the area. If we manage to do this, there is already an urban design guideline that we do for this area, the type of affordable housing to be done, the type of greens. We even try to create an area for man-made lake, small lake, okay, over there, playground, and also for people to be able to cross, because it's very walkable. It's like less than 600 meters to cross these things on different areas of it as well. So people don't have to take the car. What needs to be done to have this law to be passed is the land consolidation of that particular kampong. It's not hard, but it takes a lot of political will. We've gone all the way up to the ministry level. I mean, I would hesitate to send this to the president, but we've gone all the way up to the ministry level because this would be an excellent pilot project. I've talked to a number of green ratings companies, and a lot of them have actually talked to us and said they would welcome this type of proposals. However, the regulations have to be passed first. Now, that's probably what I would do. I would try to decarbonize a certain area pilot project. Land consolidation has to be first. Then we can take it to a higher level by creating a carbon-free area. That's within the central business district of Jakarta.
That would be an incredible accomplishment, and I think it certainly resonates with the tone of the whole discussion tonight, which is that there have been a number of very exciting advances, and with very close partnership and with increased regulation, there's an opportunity to really speed up adoption of these kinds of measures throughout. So I think a lot of work that remains to be done, and I think it highlights the importance of our city colleagues and the work that they're doing day in, day out to try to increase those regulations and efficiency and partner as much as possible to make these changes happen. We are running short on time, so I am going to bring the discussion to a close. I want to thank you, Wendy, for joining us from Jakarta and the Property Institute, and Tom for joining us from Reall tonight to talk about low carbon and real estate investment. We are going to be back in 2 weeks' time on Earth Day with a very special session. So I hope that many of you will join us again. Thanks again from Resilient Cities Network and also from our partners at the World Bank. Until next time, stay safe and stay healthy. Good night from Singapore.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Good night. Have a great day everywhere else.